Those greedy suits over at OCP, just can't help themselves. They need a sequel to their greatest success, and thus we have Robocop 2. If nothing else, you can't say this movie isn't brimming with ideas. So let's take a look. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We talk about sci-fi movie. It's that simple. We'll start spoiler free, all that usual stuff. But today we are talking about Robocop 2. We did the first one a couple months back, and it was kind of a first time watch for David. So that was kind of interesting to get his take on it and sort of look at it and sort of evaluate it in the modern day. And, you know, long story short, we rated it quite highly. It was pretty good still. But of course, that means we have to get to the sequels. We have to work through the franchise. And we're hitting Robocop 2 today. And we'll get to 3 in the remake sometime in the not too distant future. But we'll start spoiler free, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get the spoilers, as always. And if you are enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch. And of course, you can get bonus shows and other content from me and David over on our Patreon. But I'll tell you about that at the end of the show. So, premise of Robocop 2 is hard to sort of give a quick one-sentence description of. I'll just say there's a new drug on the street called Nuke, which is tearing up the streets. The cops are on strike, and OCP are up to more shady shenanigans, more capitalism to the extreme.
I knew you were going to go shenanigans. Even when you said shady, and I was like, oh, that's not the SH word I was looking for. I was like, there it is. Shenanigans.
Shenanigans. That's what I would describe this movie as. Lots of shenanigans.
Yep.
But Peter Weller is back as the titular Robocop. Nancy Allen is back as Anne Lewis. A couple other minor characters are back as well. Plus there's a whole bunch of new faces, including the new villain played by Tom Noonan called Cain. That's C-A-I-N, not to be confused with the spelling of the wrestler, just in case people come in with presumptions. I know David wouldn't, but
I mean, I know Cain is a wrestler, but I couldn't even tell you what he looks like. I've just heard the name Cain.
Well, I mean, it changed over time, but the iconic look is the big red and black mask that he'd wear.
Here, hold on. Cain wrestler. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. My brother was into wrestling for a little bit, probably a good year or two, and so I learned a lot more against my will than I would care to admit. So I recognize this guy.
Yeah. So this came out in 1990, and bizarrely is directed by Irvin Kershner, who directed The Empire Strikes Back.
Right. Like, if you're going to pull in a dude to do your sequel, aim high, I guess. Jesus Christ.
The thing is, though, is that without looking, can you name anything else this guy's directed other than Empire and this?
I couldn't even tell you this until, like, after I finished watching the movie, and I was like, oh, that was Irvin Kershner.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you I learned this at some point because someone pointed out it's the same director as Empire Strikes Back. But yeah, that's only the reason why I learned it.
Let me see here. Post-Empire, he didn't have that much. He had Never Say Never Again, which I think is a Bond film.
Well, his career's mostly before that. He was all the way back to the 50s, but it looks of it, yeah. So, I guess he's an older director. He's an older director who was just... Oh, I've seen The Eyes of Laura Mars, actually, so I have seen another one of his films. But... yeah, so he's a director who was sort of at the end of his career around Robocop 2. He just had one thing after this, and that was it. So that's interesting.
Yep.
But yeah, so that is that. So naturally, you hadn't seen this before. I have seen this a bunch of times. So I'm very curious, David. How did you feel about Robocop 2?
I think that there can be term papers, there could be video essays, there could be all these different analyses of how Robocop 2 is the definition of starting a plot and then saying, but we don't want to do that. Because, like, I don't want to get too much into it because some of the later stuff does come up as spoilers, but, like, very early on in this movie, we have it pull up the ideas of saying, like, and I won't say specifically which ones they don't want to do, but they pull up Robocop and his human side, going back to his human family. They have the idea of if Robocop gets, like, completely dismantled, what happens there? They have what happens if Robocop has his directives changed. They have what happens, the police are still on strike. Is RoboCop going to side with the police, or is he going to like be an OCP slave? They bring up all these interesting things, and almost all of them just get thrown to the side immediately. They just say, yep, that's a thing, moving on. And I couldn't help but feel so disappointed as they rejected them one by one, because what we ended up with in the end is, I think, the most boring plot that they could have gone with as a RoboCop sequel. It doesn't feel like it's analyzing any sort of intrigue of like who RoboCop is as a character, part man, part robot, all cop. It ultimately, by the end of it, the plot just soured me on the entirety of the movie. That being said, practical effects, the stop motion that they had with the Ed 209, they brought back for this, the main villain in this one, very fantastic by the end of it. There is a animatronic Peter Weller at one point that I will give top marks for. It was absolutely great looking. And there is one special effects thing where they're trying to do some CGI of a human face. And mind you, this is like even before Pixar started like messing around with it. So yeah, they didn't overplay their hand there, but it wasn't a good hand to play to begin with. So all in all, it just kind of, it struck me as disappointing the whole way through. And also, just got to bring in right here, we said the director's Irvin and Kershner, who again, it's disappointing that I don't like this as much as I would like Empire or something, but the writing credit is comic legend Frank Miller, like 3 years off of his seminal Batman work. And it's just, how do you go from like exactly what I think a good RoboCop story would be in a Batman story of someone just going out, cleaning up the streets and focusing on justice as the number one priority. And then you go to this where it's like, yeah, but like, we want to be funny about it. So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of disappointing to me all around. Maybe it's by being next to RoboCop 1 and I had higher expectations because of that, but ultimately I just couldn't get into it.
Yeah, I always forget Frank Miller had something to do with this one, but I always remember that he wrote Robocop 3. So,
okay.
Look forward to that. But, because if I remember correctly, there was a comic, probably a good decade or so ago now, where it was like his original Robocop 3 script was put out as a comic book because it had changed, significantly for the movie.
Okay.
So, I don't know if people said it was much better or just different, but interesting to know anyway. Yeah, so this is such an interesting one to come into to talk about with a first timer, because I wasn't sure exactly where we were going to land, but I'm not surprised by everything you just said. You know, I've always thought of this movie as being very, if anything, in my memory, I thought it was more episodic than it actually is. At least,
right.
I think I was almost over hyping that part in my mind from the last time I'd watched it to the point where I found this less episodic than I remembered it being. It definitely does have that thing where it starts a bunch of things and then kind of either quickly wraps them up or just forgets about them. But here's the thing.
Okay.
I think this movie is constantly entertaining. It does not have the depth of Robocop. It is not as good as Robocop. Not far from it. It is a far cry from being as good as Robocop. But I think, for whatever reason, every time it takes a weird left turn, it goes down a new path, or it just drops something, I never stop being entertained. It's funny in places. Like, it legitimately gets a few good laughs out of me. Like you said, the effects are very good. I like the final fight sequence. There's definitely a long list of things to complain about. But there's this weird thing where, this is why I think it's interesting to talk to someone who's coming to this as the first time, having just seen Robocop for the first time. Yes, compared to Robocop, it's obviously disappointing. But having grown up with the Robocop sequels, like, I've always just had fun with this one. And I don't know if I'd feel that way if I saw them both for the first time now. Like, I think I may even share the same opinions you have. But watching this, from my perspective, and I don't think it's necessarily nostalgia. I wouldn't say I feel nostalgia. I mean, maybe I do a bit, but not like to an extreme case for this. It's just more... I guess this is a phrase I like to use sometimes because sometimes it's the best thing to use for a movie like this. It's a gloriously entertaining mess. And that's how I feel about this.
No, I understand that, and I can see where you're coming from with it. I'm not going to deny that some of the moments in it didn't make me laugh. I did find entertainment in it throughout, but the biggest problem I had from it is that I think that RoboCop is absolutely rife with so many different political connotations, like different like parodies you could do of modern stuff. Even the little commercials, little insets that they do are just making fun of how capitalism has gone absolutely wild here and how it has gone like to the moon of just horribleness. But I don't feel like this movie took any of those swings. I feel like all of the plots
David,
basically revolved around, here's a fun little idea we had, but we're not going to actually explore it to as deep as we could.
No, you're right. Here, let me make this clear. This movie has nothing to say, right? It's doing the satire because RoboCop 1 did the satire, so it's emulating that kind of tone, that type of humor, but it's not actually saying anything with it. It has nothing to say. That is completely valid. That is accurate. This is partly why it's not a good, or at least not a great movie. Like, I think it's constantly doing interesting things, right? They don't flow well, right? Like you said, it does very much just kind of start up new things and goes in different directions. But there's so many of the characters that I find oddly just entertaining. Like the bad guy Kane's like a cult leader. He's got like this gorgeous bombshell girlfriend, assistant lady. He has a kid who's like the second in command, who's this mean little shit. There's a guy who's a big Elvis fan who's got like an Elvis haircut. Like it's such a weird assortment of like characters and the way they talk and interact. Even the mayor's this sort of comical, always yelling character. And there's definitely things that it just like yeah, you have to go into this with the expectation and understanding that this movie is not going to respect how the first movie ended, because the first movie ended in a very glorious, uplifting way that completed an arc for Murphy where he kind of regained some semblance of who he was. That was the point of RoboCop, right? It was the individuality and sort of realizing that throughout thick and fast. This movie just completely starts messing with that because it has to exist. It has to be a movie. It has to have RoboCop in this situation, so it just does a bunch of things, and we'll get into all that in spoilers. And another big change that I felt from the first one, even though it's not a far stretch to assume that the leader of this major corporation is an evil scumbag, I never got the sense in the first movie that the old man was just a evil piece of shit. He came across a lot more, I don't know, neutral, I guess. You know, at the end of the first movie, when RoboCop effectively saves him, you don't feel mixed about it. You don't feel like, oh, he just saved the evil, CEO. But in this movie, he is mustache twirling. He is, oh yeah, let's put all our evil schemes in motion so OCP can be the leaders of the world, the leaders of Detroit at the very least.
It struck me in the way of like the first RoboCop was almost like they wanted to get out there and say, yes, all of this evil capitalism stuff is bad. But then when they ended the movie, they kind of realized like, no, what we really pointed out there is that individual people within the system are bad. But we didn't say that like the company as a whole was bad. So then in this one, they doubled back and they're like, okay, but no, this guy's evil too. Like they're all bad. Let's focus on how they're bad now.
Yeah. And I get it. Like it just, why would OCP be doing all this stuff they're doing in this movie if the person in charge of it wasn't a bad guy? Right? Because the first movie, it definitely made it feel like Miguel Ferreira was the one instigating a lot of the really shady stuff underneath and the guise of him being cutthroat, trying to get to the top. And Ronnie Cox as well, actually, to be fair. There was multiple
I would say he's more antagonist,
But, I mean, like, they were doing what they were doing because this capitalist system's so bad and it creates these monsters who are ruthless and try to get what they want, yada, yada. But, this kind of just like, just comical. Everyone's a villain in that system. It's just what it is. But I kind of, like, there's a scene right at the start of this movie. Not the opening's like, there's like an ad at the start and then like some new stuff. But the first scene of this movie, I love it. Because it's this over-the-top butterfly effect of crime, where one thing happens, and then that person gets mugged by someone, and then that person gets mugged by other people, and then there's an explosion, and there's a robbery going on, and then eventually it gets to Robocop. But like, there's this chain reaction of things that all happen, and it's just like, this is the absurdity, right? Like this is an alternate universe Detroit where things are like, why it's kind of like when people talk about Gotham City in the comics, like why does anyone live in Gotham anymore with all these villains running around? Like the Detroit that's presented to us in this movie is like, why would anyone own a business here? Because every single business gets looted.
Well, I think that it spins out because one of the little mini ad things or little television cutaways that they had right before this was specifically showing that the police are either still on strike from the end of the first movie or have started up a new strike in the meantime. So I think this is just basically to show like, okay, police are on strike. What does it look like when that happens? Because we saw that at the end of Robocop 1. We saw, okay, the police went on strike and we saw there was looting. There was all this stuff. And I think it does a good job of setting that up, of saying, okay, here's how bad Detroit gets after however long of the police on strike. And you're right. It is this massive set piece, this butterfly effect of just running through all these different, literally an old woman gets robbed off the street. She has her purse snatched. And that's kind of like the first thing that happens that sets everything else up. So I like that scene. It's super good. The problem being is I don't feel like it goes anywhere besides just general setting.
Nothing goes anywhere, right? I'm not.
Yeah.
At no point am I going to argue that. So you don't need to point that out every time. Right?
All right.
We're done with that. We know this movie does not come together in some big way and say something about either capitalism, individuality like the first one, man versus machine, whatever. Like, doesn't say a thing, right? Robocop 2, like, maybe there was a draft of the script where it did say something and it got cut down, significantly. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but I think the pacing's pretty relentless. I think it storms through just all these plot beats. And it's funny to me how they sort of daisy chain into one another, where it's like this big opening set piece we were talking about ends with Robocop saying, oh, where does this nuke come from? And that immediately leads to a scene of him going to this place to try and deal with nuke, manufacturers. And that leads to, like, everything just keeps knocking on to the next scene. And technically that's supposed to be true of movies. Think one scene's supposed to motivate another. But with this, it just kind of feels like you're dropped in and it just keeps, I don't know, it's like, and then this happened, and then this happened. That's what it feels like.
What it reminds me the most of, and this is going to sound damning as hell, but it reminds me of when we watched the 50 Shades movies.
I see where you're going with this. Go on.
Because the 50 Shades movies, like those, the original source material was like a fan fiction. It was just written chapter by chapter, section by section. It was very much episodic, but it always felt like we set this thing up and then it gives that hint. It says like, and where will we go next? Well, we're going to go investigate this thing. But it's not like that's set up for 4 chapters from now, 10 chapters from now. It's not like it's setting up the overall arc. It's setting up literally the very next thing we do. And then that chapter will do the exact same thing. It'll say, and where do we go from here? Well, we're going to do this thing. It's a constant pace of here's setup, here's the payoff, and here's the next setup. We never have 2 concurrent plots running at any given time.
And I was into it. I was entertained. It still works for me. After all this time, it's the right amount of pacing, the right amount of colorful, memorable characters, just the right amount of bullshit and silly ideas, but good visuals, good action scenes. The action scenes all look and have great direction. I felt that's maybe the benefit of having Irvin Kershner. There's a car / motorbike chase at one point in this movie that is really well done. Yeah, it's such a weird thing because it definitely reeks of, we want a sequel, so we gave it to an interesting choice to write, if nothing else, in Frank Miller, and he definitely, it feels like you can feel a little bit of Frank Miller-ness in this. You definitely feel a little bit of that vibe to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I don't feel like Frank Miller's leaking through to some extent, but it definitely, I can almost feel that it was rushed. I can almost feel like they tapped Frank Miller, and Frank Miller was just like, yeah, all right, here's something.
Think of the punks or the criminals in Dark Knight Returns and things like that. I'm thinking of the type of cities that Frank Miller writes. I can definitely feel a bit of that in here.
Oh yeah, and he fits in, like, it doesn't feel like there is a difference between the Detroit of the last movie and the Detroit of this movie. It's not like all of a sudden Frank Miller came and changed it up to fit his vision. Like, he was perfectly well chosen to tell this dystopian capitalism gone mad Detroit. And I'm all for that.
Absolutely. So Yeah, it's not a great movie by any means, but goddamn if I don't just have fun watching it. And you know,
I mean, I will say, I think there has been, and this may be in the marketing, this may be in, directorial choices. It does feel a little bit toned down in terms of violence and gore and such. It feels like they realized kids are the ones that are like, would be enjoying Robocop the most. And while they're not catering it to kids specifically, it does feel like they're making it so kids won't be scarred for life by watching it.
I would say the squibs from the gunshot still feel pretty violent, but that's about it. Although there is one guy who gets shot through the eye, which is a pretty cool gore effect. But there's no one melting in this one. There's no one, having limbs shot off.
There's no Paul Verhoeven in this one.
Which is a shame, all things considered. But
yes.
But credit where it's due. It's just this pulpy, almost cerebral, like just vomit just coming up like through the screen the entire movie, and I find that kind of fascinating. I was actually thinking as I was watching this, because I was about a third of the way in, I'm like, I'm really enjoying this, and it's not that good, but I kind of love it anyway. And I was thinking, does that only happen with movies I grew up with that I can sort of look at now and say aren't good? And then I thought about it, no, it can still happen with new movies, because this is exactly how I felt when Texas Chainsaw 3D came out in 2013. They instantly went into that category of, this is a dumb, bad movie, but I love it. And it's like, you can't, I don't know if you can try and go for that. I don't know if it's possible to aim for that sort of zone to fall into for my taste. Right. But it's always interesting to me when something does fall into that, where it's just the right taste of bullshit for me to just be into it the entire time.
I'm trying to think what the previous franchise we had was that kind of fell into that. I can't remember what it was, or if it was even on this show, but there was you know what it is? It's what we are currently in the middle of, Rocky season.
Oh yeah?
Over on Collector's Cut. And that is the idea that it starts off the first entry or entries with like this more heady sort of introspective thing. It gives you like these big questions to think about. In Robocop's case, it's the idea of man versus machine, and like, the corruption of the governments and stuff like that. It's all this bigger stuff. But then over time, whether because they don't want to have to tell that heady of a story over and over, or if they just feel like it's more marketable to do a more open sort of, we're just going to have dumb fun with this, they slim it down, they strip it down to its essentials. And whereas Rocky initially began as a story of a very down on his luck man, and it just happened to be about fighting, the rest of the movies kind of just said, but it's about fighting. Like, we don't have to worry about the rest of Rocky's backstory. It's just about fighting. This is that same sort of thing, but it's happening in the second movie, where it feels like they just stripped it down and got rid of all the cerebral stuff, all of the like think pieces, and we're just like, okay, but what if other robot? And then like, that's it. It's like, all right, well, sure.
Yeah, I mean, what you're really just describing is any sequel to a special movie, right? Anything that comes out and is special and leaves a stamp and has something to say, but it's a success and it's something that can be turned into a franchise. It then gets maybe entertaining, but more simple or streamlined thing, as a result. It's incredibly lucky or special when somehow someone can, whether it's the same people behind the camera or not, who can do a second chapter and have it feel like it is just saying as much, or it's saying something new, so therefore stands out in its own way, side by side with the original. Again,
I throw Kershner under the bus there, because he did that. He did possibly one of the best sequels to an original film of all time. But
true, but we have to factor in writing as well, and he's not a writer. Yes. He's not writing these movies. He's a director for hire, so which I think he's good at. And to be fair, I think the direction in this is pretty solid.
Oh yeah.
So
I didn't have any. I can't think of any moment in this. You were talking about the pacing and stuff before, and how it doesn't let up. I agree. I think that it is just constantly hitting you with stuff. I think that I do kind of view that as a little bit of a negative once we hit about the halfway point in the movie, though, because at that point, I'm never convinced that we're on the plot. Like, the plot that we're going to ride out the rest of this movie with. I keep on waiting for it to change again, so I keep on getting disengaged with the constant like changing of it. If they had done a little downbeat at some point, I would have been like, okay, then when we come back, we'll get into the big thing.
I do wonder if on a second viewing sometime in the future, because you know what you're getting into, if that's as much of a concern. If you're like, no, I'm just here for this stupid ride that I know I'm getting into now.
I guarantee you, if I went into this not thinking RoboCop 1, but instead thinking RoboCop 2, I would absolutely have a different expectation.
Yeah. All right, let's give the spoiler warning shot. Actually, no. The thing I always forget to talk about and then do right before spoilers is the music. I do want to talk about the music in this because it does have a distinctive main theme, but it's not, it's not the composer from the first movie and it's not the themes from the first movie. So while it's perfectly fine, dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun, it's not as good as the first one. I will say what sticks out to me about that though, sort of with the hindsight of having seen the whole series, is that Basil from the first movie comes back for the third one, so all the themes come back in the third movie. So it does leave RoboCop 2 feeling kind of weird that it doesn't have the main themes of the series, but it's fine. Although the thing I really wanted to point out though is because when I got to the end and the credits hit, I let them play as I was doing something on my phone, and I don't think I'd ever noticed this before, but the main theme's playing. And it's funny you brought up Rocky because it's very Rocky-esque. There's like a choir that comes in that starts going RoboCop right over the theme, and the first time I heard it, I sort of looked up and went, "Did they just say RoboCop, or am I just is it just sort of is it more of a generic right?" But then I just kept listening, and they did it again. I'm like, "No, they're saying RoboCop. They've actually got a choir saying RoboCop, and it sounds cheesy as shit."
Every once in a while I see like behind the scenes stuff of like the music composer's room, like the orchestra and all that, and they show like the choir in the back, and it is almost always looking like your grandmother's church choir. Like it's all like a bunch of 80-year-olds just up there singing with their books. I would love to see them say, okay, now right now I need you guys to chant RoboCop, and they'd be like, what the hell is a RoboCop?
Oh, delightful. All right, spoilers for RoboCop 2. You have been warned. Surprise cameo right at the start of the movie. John Glover is in the opening ad.
I thought for sure that they weren't just going to throw away John Glover. I thought he was going to be like a character that like keeps coming up. Nah, just here, nowhere else.
Just this. Nah, it's a criminal breaking into a car, but the car has a security system installed that electrocutes any potential thieves. So John Glover comes along like the presenter for the company, and he's like, "Oh, hey, look at that! Don't even have to call the police. Don't have to do anything.
No embarrassing alarm noise. It just does it."
Yeah, and then it's like the name of the company comes out because they lethal enforcement or something like that. I'm like, oh man.
I mean, it does a good job of setting it up because it tricks you going into it. All the other like video clips, the TV stuff have the little scan lines going across it.
This one's intentionally misleading.
Yeah. But it opens up with a guy breaking into a car. So you're expecting it to be like, oh, and then RoboCop steps in and stops it. And like, that's our first appearance. Nah, this dude just dies. And then like John Glover just drives off. And then it goes into, oh, okay. Right, they did commercials. I remember that now.
Yep. And we get news. We hear about the nuke. We hear about Kane. And we hear about the police on strike. Whether it's the same strike as the first movie or not, it's hard because it says RoboCop's been around for a year, so I'm like, have the police been on strike for a whole year? That was a long time, but
I feel like Detroit would just be gone by now, but whatever.
Yeah.
I did want to throw in the tiny little throwaway story they did before the nuke, though, which is a nuclear power plant in the Amazon rainforest like exploded, and they were just like, and environmentalists are saying this is the biggest catastrophe of all time, and the other anchor's just like, don't they always say that anyway? And I'm like, ooh, that's satire. That's what I'm here for.
Just to stick on the commercials, because I mean, there's no point in trying to fit them where they pop up. One of my favorites, especially because I noticed something it said on the screen, was there's like, so this woman's in a pool and she's like, oh, I'm in Beverly Hills, California, and they say that ever since the ozone layer fell, you can't enjoy the Californian sun anymore, but yes you can with Suntan 5000, and she puts it on, and it's this neon blue and green like paste. She completely coats herself in it, and she's like, you put a coating of this on and you're fine for hours. But my favorite part, none of this was funny. Well, it was amusing, but none of it was funny to me. The bit that was funny is it came up with the name of the thing, and then underneath it said, disclaimer, frequent use can cause skin cancer.
No, not can, will.
Will.
Frequent use will cause skin cancer. That's fantastic.
That popped me. That really got me. There was another one as well. What was the other one, if you remember?
I don't know. It doesn't stand out as well in my head, because that's the only other one I remember as well.
Well, okay. Well, in that case, who cares? It wasn't important. Oh, no. Actually, no. I did like the other one. I remember it. Oh, it's a guy that commits suicide because he was waiting for like a bank transfer to go through, right?
Yes.
And he's like, oh, because this transfer took 48 hours, I've lost my company, I've lost my livelihood, my life is over. He then shoots himself in the head, and then it comes up saying, OCP Communications, the only safe choice.
Yeah, like the only choice. And the last image as it comes up is a picture of his son, like a portrait framed in the background as you hear the gun go off. It's like, Jesus Christ, OCP.
Do you know what I liked about that one, though? Is that I thought it was a really good punchline, because I didn't know what obviously I could tell it was one of the commercials, but I'm like, okay, what's this for? And when you realize it's basically just advertising internet speed, I can just imagine one of our modern telecom companies saying, hey, other companies will make you kill yourself because it's too slow.
Oh, yeah.
That's basically what the ad is.
I just imagine that, like, 10 years from now, T-Mobile's going to pull up on my TV and they're going to be like, Comcast will kill your dog. It's going to do it. He's going to drive by. He's going to kill your dog. T-Mobile.
Oh, delightful stuff. So yes, we mentioned it earlier, but the scene where it's like a woman who I thought was homeless because she was pushing like a trolley full of cans.
Mm-hmm.
But then a car hits the trolley, the cans go over, and this guy comes up to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Did that hit you?" But then he takes her handbag, like he robs her, and she's got money and like jewelry in it, and I'm like, I thought she was homeless. Like, who was this woman?
I mean, she might be homeless, and that was just her previous cashing in of cans.
What, the gold?
No.
Like, okay.
No, that was sentimental. That was
all
her.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
But then he's counting his winnings, and then two women dressed for a night out, like, come out and start pumping their stilettos into his balls. And whatever else.
They're prostitutes, because they literally pick it up and say, "All right, let's go pay Papa, and then we'll get out of here."
No, I don't just say they're going to go get a nuke. I'm pretty sure that they imply that.
Yeah, they say the point where they say they're going to go pay Papa. It's their pimp, and then they're going to use the rest to go get nuked.
Okay.
Like, they got to give him a certain amount of money.
Yeah. But this is all very comical, because as they're walking away, you just hear this guy on the floor in the background just going, "Oh, you bitches! Ah!"
Yeah. And like, as they walk by, they're just walking casually down the street. There's like tons of other beatings going on in the background.
Yes.
Like, everything sucks all the time.
And then the store explodes, turns out to be a gun store. And I love this thing that are in movies that gun stores have like military grade like rocket launchers in their stock. Yeah. It's like, because it's not the only movie. Commando's guilty of that. Commando has it. I mean, at least in Commando it was in a locked room in the back, which I still seems unfeasible, but at least that's more than just here's a rocket launcher sitting on the counter with the rocket sitting inside it. Like, it's ready to fire.
I could understand them having a rocket launcher, because that would definitely be a major draw for like customers who want to see it.
Oh yeah, like,
but having the rocket in there, that seems a bit much.
Yeah. The poor owner of the shop, because the guy's like, "Where's the bullets for this gun, man?" And he puts the bullets in. He's like, "I really like this gun." And he's like, "Fine, just take it, thanks." And he shoots him. Like, yeah, okay,
no mercy.
That's you, Dad. But then you hear the siren, and they're like, "Wait, that can't be a siren. The cops are on strike. It doesn't make any sense." And this is where the audience all goes, "Oh, there's one cop who doesn't need workers' rights."
I mean, you say that, but we also see that there are also several other cops who are still working through the strike as well.
Yeah, but we don't know that yet. But that is kind of weird that there are cops that are still working. So, like, I guess some are siding with a union and some aren't.
Well, I think that's kind of one of the things in this movie, that the police strike is played up as this thing, and we see it come up several times. And then later on, Robocop gets into trouble, and all the cops are just like, "Okay, we're done with the strike now." And then they all just go do their jobs. And I'm like, why are we doing the strike thing if that's not what we're going to do for a while, you know?
Robocop inspires them. He says, "Are we cops?" And then they'll go, "You know what? Yeah, we are. Throw the signs down. Let's go arrest the bad guy."
Are we cops? Yes, and that's why we deserve a living wage.
Look, do you know what? That doesn't even bother me that much, because the thing that happens right before that is a much more bullshit solution to another plot problem, which we'll get to later.
It is Frank Miller, assuming he wrote that scene, having no idea how computers work.
Yes, that is fair. So Robocop's come in, they blow up his car with a rocket launcher. In fact, there's a second rocket launcher. It's a different kind of rocket launcher that he then whips out and blows the car up again. But Robocop gets his iconic entrance, the foot comes down, clunk, clunk, and then he, comes up and says,
Yeah, I don't know if...
Or something.
He's like, well, your move, creep, or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a thing that I just started noticing, or if they did change the audio balance a little bit. I really noticed all of the whirring noises this time. It kind of blended into the background for me in the last movie, but this time, every time he turns his head or moves his arm, obviously you have the mechanical whirring noises, but it just really stood out for me. I heard every single one of them throughout this movie.
I'd have to go back and compare to see if the sound mix is different significantly from the first one, or if you're just noticing it more. But I mean, it's possible it's a bit more aggressive in the sound mix.
Yeah. Also, Robocop is blue now. Shiny blue. He's definitely got a different finish on his armor.
Sure.
Whereas the last one was very much a silver. This one is like a chrome sort of thing.
It's not super different, but yeah, there's a slight color tinge. Maybe they thought this was more... I don't know.
It struck me more as we have an action figure, and we can't make it look like that level of silver, but we can make it look chrome.
Maybe. Or maybe they already sold one round of action figures, and they thought if we change the color slightly, then they'll need the new version as well.
Yep. You only got the Robocop 1 action figure, Timmy. Pshaw. Here's the Robocop 2 action figure.
Yeah, but then Timmy's like, yeah, but Robocop 1 has all of the subtext and nuance, Jeff.
No one cares about that, Timmy. Buy the toy.
So, yeah, basically, he takes them all out, and he grabs, one guy and, holds him up and says, this nuke, where do you get it? Where is it made? He's like, I don't know, I just know where I get it. So he squeals. And that's the thing, is how this just leads right away to Robocop going to this hideout where they've got urban slaves making this nuke for them. But he does a whole thing where he knocks on the door, and there's a gunman, and there's a sort of slidey eye hole thing. And when he looks out the eye hole, Robocop just punches through the door, and all I could think was, I mean, I guess there's more of an element of surprise because you'll be there to hit, but you could have just banged through the door in the first place. So it didn't seem to make much of a difference.
I mean, it made sure that if there was a guard at the door, he took out the guard. That's all he was trying to do there.
That's true. He's actually very tactical because he locks a couple of other gunmen in a freezer or something as he's walking past. He just locks them in.
I'll never get over the fact that the later parts of the movie thankfully don't do this, but in this beginning part, it almost feels like they're trying to show he's going for stealth. And I'm like, bro, he is a 500-pound clanking robot that cannot hide if he wanted to. How in the hell is he managing to remain undetected here?
Yes, I've thought so one particular scene later, actually, but we'll get to that. So he just walks in and goes, "This is a bust." And of course, the violent criminals aren't willing to just go quietly into the good night, so a gunfight breaks out.
He does manage to pick out specifically the ones who are either in charge or are not the indentured servants that are forced to work here. So those are the only ones that he's actually targeting for. Everyone else he just kind of lets escape. Yeah.
And they've got a limo. They've got a white limo they all run to and get away in. But we also get Lewis back here. She comes darting in her armor. She's not, she's not striking. She's here to help her partner out. She's here to help Murphy.
She's a cop.
Yeah. Although she does open the freezer that Robocop locked a couple of guys in. Now, admittedly, she does take care of them very efficiently. It was never a problem for her. But I'm like, Lewis, Robocop locked them in there for a reason. What are you doing?
They were taken care of. If anything, this is just an unnecessary show of force. These two guys were not a problem, and then you made them a problem, and then you shot them dead.
Well, then the implication is, though, she doesn't know they're bad guys. She just hears people yelling for help.
Nah, that's fair.
So she's like, oh, I must help these innocent people who are trapped. Oh no, they're violent and have guns. I must take them out because I'm a badass.
Yeah, and then she's competent enough to do it quickly. Fair enough. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what they were going for. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, so this, we get, let's just sort of focus on one thing they sort of do here for about 10 minutes and then never do again.
Okay.
We have to know about Robocop and his wife and the family stuff.
Yeah, so in this group, as you already brought up, in the nuke production facility, there's this kid, and his name is Hob, and I love him. I think he is an absolutely fantastic kid actor here. He just steals the show away, and like everything he's doing, he is so good at being just the worst. So he's hiding around. Robocop manages to target him, but his programming does not allow him to shoot a kid. It's not allowing him. So,
which is fair. I mean, there's a fine rule.
Yeah, I think that's okay to have in the directives. But then the kid realizes this, and he's like, "All right, cool," and he shoots Robocop square in the head, which then triggers a memory flashback thing to his wife and his kid, and he like sees that happening again. And then the rest of the nuke scenes plays out, like a couple of them getting away, a couple of them staying put. But then, yeah, we get the next sequence where it's Robocop going and like stalking his previous family.
Yeah, he just drives past the house and the wife is clearly noticing. And it cuts immediately to a new character who works at OCP, Holzgang, apparently, is his name.
It's the guy who replaces, what's his name, after he was killed by a grenade last movie.
Yeah. Miguel Ferrera's character.
Yes.
Johnson's still there and all that as well, but we don't see him until we go to OCP. This guy's here sort of representing the company, and he's like, what are you doing? The wife's trying to sue OCP for you, like, stalking and traumatizing her. She's starting to, she's just getting over the loss of her husband, and now she's all confused because you're hanging around. And they basically try to get him to admit that he's not a man, that he is simply a machine, right?
Yep.
And I think what they're going for here, and it works to an extent, but it is weird that this is just the end of it and never comes up again. Especially since, the first movie ended with Murphy declaring, no, I am Murphy. And then for the rest of this movie, Lewis still calls him Murphy. In fact, even other cops call him Murphy. They all refer to him as Murphy now, which is nice. But it does make this a bit weird where the wife comes in and, he's like, touch me. And she touches his lip and she's like, it's cold. He's like, yeah, they made this. I am a machine, nothing more. Your husband is dead. Get over it. And
you say it like that, but that's exactly how he says it. He's like, move on, bitch.
Now, to be fair, though, I think what they're going for here is because something that Holzgang just said to him was like, hey, what do you think is going to happen? Like, do you think you could be a husband? Do you think you could be a father? Do you think you could show love? Do you think you'd make someone happy the way you are? So I think what they're going for here, and I can kind of understand it, is that Robocop is basically lying here. He's basically trying to convince his wife that he's not really Murphy so that she can move on. He's basically sacrificing whatever happiness he still wants from her so that she can move on and have some kind of normal life. Now, is that for him to decide? That's.
No, but I mean, it would make sense, him being Robocop, there is this idea of duty and sacrifice and being willing to lay down his own well-being for others.
I would like this, probably, if somehow his wife and son came back into the plot later and he had to go and save them. That would be something.
Bro, I would like this if it came back in any meaningful way at all. Like, literally, he says, I'm not your husband. She storms out. He looks sad. And then it's just gone. And the only thing I could think is what you said is that at the end of Robocop 1, they kind of they left that thread dangling. And then they set up the fact that, like, he is Murphy. He is human. And all I could think is, Frank Miller didn't want to write that. Frank Miller wanted to write the robot. And like, that's just what they ended up with. They had to immediately just say, we're dealing with that. We're not going to go back to it. Moving on. And then it's just gone.
Which, honestly, Robocop deciding that he wants to stay away from his wife because, well, he knows he's Murphy, he remembers loving his wife, but he wants her to be able to move on because this is what he is now. Like, I can be okay with that line of thinking and him sort of coming to that realization and however he goes about it, but yeah, it's weird the way it's presented here where this happens and then there's... Because I thought, oh, not this time, but on a first viewing, I would think, oh, there must be a payoff to this later,
Right.
where he comes swooping in, saves the day or something, and has to admit, maybe in fact, the end of the movie could even be, like, the final scene could be him going back to the house and knocking on the door, cut to credits, as if, no, he's going to go and say the truth, right? That's the end of your arc for Robocop of the movie.
Just in talking about it, you know what it immediately got me thinking about? The new Star Wars trilogy. Of all the things that J.J. Abrams set up in the first movie, and then Rian Johnson just came in and said, yeah, but no. Like, we're not going to do that. And instead of just not dealing with them, instead of just leaving them on the back burner for them to be dealt with some other time, he actively shuts them down and says, we aren't doing that. And then, like, wraps them up quickly, never to be spoken of again.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a difference just in the sense that with that Star Wars movie, it was supposed to be the start of a trilogy, and so therefore everything was expected to... Whereas with the original Robocop, it was made as a standalone film where this is the ending. It wasn't like, oh, we're leaving threads dangling for a sequel. It didn't. It's just that because they're doing a sequel, they have to kind of address one or two things to make it make sense. So, it's strange. Honestly, it's probably my least favorite thing in the film, just because it's this little dour subplot for 5 minutes, but once it's gone, it's like, I would like a payoff to it. Like I said, if the ending was just him accepting that he has to be honest and then, like, come to a decision together about what the future is or something, that would be a nice payoff to it. But
yeah,
oh well.
I think I also would have, like, even if they did even just a tiny little bit of emotional maneuvering here of, like, as soon as he says this to his wife, he has his helmet off, whatever you want to call it, his visor, he goes over and puts it on. And it's like, okay, from here on out, he is Robocop. He is no longer the Murphy that we knew. But
as soon as he turns around, maybe even just see him look a bit sad. Like, oh, that took a lot out of him to say that, because it wasn't true. It hurt, you know? Like, something.
Whichever way they want to go with it, whether they wanted to wrap up or have it open-ended, but it just feels like what it was left at is not enough in either direction.
Yeah. So, elsewhere here, we do meet OCP, and we start kind of one of the backbone subplots of the movie, which is the government, the city of Detroit, owe OCP $37 million for things, for taking over the city, for something.
For Robocop and the police and all that sort of stuff.
And basically, if they don't pay it in time, they foreclose on the city of Detroit, and OCP will own Detroit and can turn it into Delta City. All right, okay. So one of the subplots of this movie is the mayor being very... And to be fair, I think the mayor is very entertaining. Like, see, there's a moment when they're walking out of this meeting, and Johnson's there with the old man, and this other new guy's there. As they're walking out of this room, and the mayor turns around and says, oh, I'm going to sue your ass. And the old man, very cocky, just goes, oh, you're welcome to give it a try. He just yells immediately, F you. Like, he gets so angry at how confident the old man is. It's actually very entertaining.
Oh, yeah. I think that this character is like 2 steps down from Chris Tucker in Fifth Element.
Yes.
Like, he's very bombastic, very big. He's not quite at that same level, but he's got power behind him. I'm trying
to imagine a world in which a guy that yells like this gets elected a mayor. I mean,
it's American politics, man.
I mean, I guess so, but he seems so off kilter. Like, he just gets so angry so quickly that it feels weird that he would, in a political debate on TV, he would be able to, like, not just start swearing and yelling at the other person.
You say that like it's not what half of Americans want to see.
Okay, fine. I'm tiptoeing into accidental satire myself here, so that's
absolutely.
So we're also introduced here to, what was her name? Juliet Fax, apparently.
I know her as Fax. If she had a first name, so be it.
Yeah, so Fax with 2 X's because it's sexier that way. She's like this sexy scientist lady who's got her own ideas of what a Robocop 2 should be. In fact, we get a fantastic montage here. It's only like 3 examples, I think, but we basically see that Johnson's been leading up the team, the scientific R&D team, to like do a new version of Robocop. And I love this gag here, which is that every brain, every like other dead cop that's either volunteered or they've taken to be their new Robocop, and they've put in, they're very different designs, right? You know, one's a lot more kind of like what Robocop 2 ends up looking like later on, actually. One looks a lot more like he's from like an anime or something with a sort of slick back sort of like head that goes pointy.
Yeah.
That one's especially funny because it rips off its like metal helmet and you just see this screaming skeleton face.
I love to see the background of these scientists that said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's let him lift off his head and show a screaming skeleton. That would be great.
I don't think they let him. I think this was on plan, David.
Oh no, I'm sure it was unplanned, but the fact that like they allow him to take off his mask at all when all is underneath is a skeleton, like bolt that down, man. You don't need that to open.
Yeah, well, what I love it as well is that there's a sort of like, there's like a sort of second level scientist dude here who's in a sling, and I'm like, oh, why is he in a sling? And then you get to see why he's in the sling, because the bigger one does a bit of an Ed 209 and just starts shooting everyone in the room before trying to commit suicide. And that's the running gag here, is that all of these new versions of Robocop all get suicidal and just try and kill themselves. And it's
instantly.
It's darkly, comically funny. And it does actually lead to an interesting conversation, because when this Fax character comes in and says, oh, I've got some ideas, like, I think it's, incorrect that you've been picking these cops that are, and Johnson's like, oh, I vetted them all. They're all upstanding citizens. They're all family people. And she's like, yeah, but that's kind of the problem, is that they've got all this life they remember. They've like, you need to find someone who finds this desirable. But the thing that I thought was actually a good little point they bring in here is that the reason why Murphy succeeded, because Johnson points that out, the one success we've ever had was this guy, Robocop, was Alex Murphy. And she's like, yeah, I think he worked because he had like this sense of duty that sort of kept him like straight no matter what. Right? Because we saw in the first movie that, the memory of his wife and son was a challenge for him to deal with. It was something that could have went bad. But he had this heroic sense of doing the right thing, and this sense of like being a good cop that actually kept him on the sane path, as it were. I actually thought that was an interesting little, thing to posit. A little,
I mean, I like what they're saying in a general idea sense, but I do feel like pretty much everything she's saying in the scene doesn't apply to any future things. Like, she just immediately pivots down a different path entirely.
Oh no, she's like, let's find the most homicidal maniac we can to be the new Robocop. That's like her thing after this.
Yeah.
She's also casually having an affair with the old man. There's a point where Johnson comes in and tries to get her fired because, she's looking at all these criminals, and the old man's in this like obscenely over the top rich person's hot tub that's got like stones leading up to it and all that. And she comes out in a bathrobe with some like coffee for the old man. It's like, oh, so this is like a thing between, not that this is any allegiance. The old man's ready to throw her under the bus at the end of the movie, but he is taking advice from someone he is more than happy to sleep with. Is clearly what's happening here.
I have to imagine during that sequence that Johnson was like debating, like, I can get naked too if you want. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, somehow I don't think the old man's going to go for that. Quite. I mean, maybe he is. Maybe the old man's an adventurous fellow who swings all the ways. But
hey, man, once you hit a certain age, you're willing to try anything.
So, I mean that stuff's all set up, and that kind of like leads that's seeing some things for later. But to get back to RoboCop, we also have to talk about a corrupt cop that's introduced around here called Duffy, who's on Nuke. And very quickly we see that he is feeding intel to the villains, police routes, that kind of thing. And it's pretty nefarious, because it sounds like he's giving them saying, hey, these cops are vulnerable because they patrol on their own. It's like, wait, are you helping them assassinate cops? That's pretty dire.
Yeah, but he's not only getting his drug fix because of it, he's also getting a massive wad of cash.
Yes.
Which obviously during the strike, that's something that the cops would want to have.
Although I think he's on strike, though. He was in the station doing stuff.
Yeah, but like regardless, like the cops don't believe they're being paid well enough, so this is a way that he's able to get that extra money.
Yeah. I mean, they do bring up money because they talk about their pensions being cut and stuff, although definitely in the first movie it was never about the money. In the first movie it was more about, we're all getting killed out there, it's too dangerous, we need more resources, more backup, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that is something that we just kind of gloss past with the mayor talking to the OCP head, is he basically calls him out by saying, like, you orchestrated the police strikes so that the city would get worse, so that we're unable to repay you. Like, this has all been OCP's plan from the beginning, is for us to default on our stuff. And they're like, yeah, and?
I think the new guy's like, that was the easy part. Like, all right, villains. Actually, just on the whole, them being villains, I couldn't help but notice that towards the end of the movie, there was big red banners with the OCP logo in a white circle, which if that doesn't conjure up a very specific image in your head of like what they're calling back to with that.
It was so on the nose. It's so just immediately there. And I get it to like a certain extent, but at the same time, like to go that far with it, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, maybe it'd have been less on the nose just to have a different color, maybe just to differentiate it a little bit, but still have the reference.
I mean, part of me appreciates the fact that they're just so out there with it. They're just like, yeah, they're that evil. They're going to just straight up use that iconography, and they don't care.
Yep. So Robocop comes to bust this. In fact, him and Lewis are doing some reconnaissance. They're spying on the kid. They've found the kid at this arcade, and they're listening to what he's doing with like sort of long-range microphone. But this is where they also catch Duffy, the corrupt cop, making deals and whatnot. So they go down to like bust this up. Robocop, one of the things I remember from this movie more than anything else is him walking into an arcade full of like troubled youths and saying, "Isn't this a school night?"
They just start throwing food at him. They're just like, "Screw you, Robocop."
Yeah, of course Duffy ends up running into Robocop as well, which leads to some throwing around into some arcade machines. Lewis tries to come in from a different angle, does encounter the kid. The kid's got this like weird fold-up machine gun that he kind of whips out. Yeah,
apparently that's a real thing. Apparently they didn't invent that for this movie. It's actually like an actual weapon. But yeah, it's crazy. It's awesome looking. It's very high tech.
Fair enough. But again, you know, they go on the run and it's a whole thing. In fact, it leads pretty quickly to Robocop gets the location of where Kane is. Duffy knows that, which feels a bit weird actually that Duffy knows where their main hideout is. That didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me, but you know, the movie's full of little things like that don't make sense. In fact, there's one coming up that probably bothered me more than anything else, is that Robocop the next day, it's broad daylight, and he's coming towards this old factory or whatever. It's very reminiscent of the location from the end of the first movie, actually. But he's coming to this sort of industrial building, and he's driving in slowly, and all of the bad guys are aware that he's coming, which means either Duffy was able to phone them and say, hey, he's on his way, or maybe the kid or someone overheard this information being passed on or something. I don't know, but like...
Yeah, later on, Duffy gets in some trouble with them, so I think that they know Duffy gave him up.
Yeah, but they seem to know quite quickly, at the very least. Yeah. And Robocop's coming in, and it's all this very like tense thing where they're all hiding, and he's driving up through the front gate. And they do this thing where the car goes forward a few feet into like the premises, and it blows up. There was like a bomb in the ground waiting for it.
It caught me off guard, if I'm being honest. I was watching this with headphones. That one made me jump. I was like, Jesus, all right. Didn't see it coming.
Right? And, like, you know, the Elvis guy comes down and he's like checking the wreckage. He's got a big smile on his face as if, aha, job well done. And then it reveals that Robocop is, like, hiding behind, like, the outer wall. Like, somehow he knew there was a trap here, and he, like, tricked them by getting out of the car before he let the car sort of just drive into where the bomb was. I mean, I guess the easy explanation is that his robot, like, sensor visor thing, like, detected it. But they give us no hint. It felt like Robocop only knew this was here because he read the script. And he knew that there was going to be a bomb there.
I'm not even so much about the fact that he knew there was going to be a bomb there or whatever. I'm okay with him being suspicious enough and thinking like, okay, it's too easy. Like, they're going to have some traps or something. I can accept that. My thing is, going back to the earlier point of, how in the hell does this 5,000-pound man of metal somehow, like, with all these guys watching, you see them watching, not get into the car, hide behind this building instead, and they don't immediately know that.
Yeah, well, I think that my bigger problem, though, is that they set up, okay, Robocop's tricked them, the car's blown up, they think he's dead, so he's going to, like, have the element of surprise and sort of sneak it, at least until he, like, maybe encounters the first person. But instead, like, the next couple of shots show him, like, walking through the place, and all of the bad guys are sneaking around and watching him like they already know he's here, and I'm like, why did we do the whole tricking them then with the car?
Yeah. No, honest to God, it just feels like it's a moment for the audience, and it specifically breaks some rules that are established in the movie's universe just to have it be the audience think Robocop blew up. But the problem is, we already had that moment. We saw the RPG scene. We know that's not going to work. So why in the hell are we doing it again?
Yeah, it's very weird. But regardless, Robocop tries to stalk around this place, tries to shoot them. Ultimately, though, they're actually kind of waiting. In fact, Kane, the main villain, who, we've kind of established as a bit of a cult leader at this point, and they all follow him, they all kind of worship him. He kind of stands with a sort of air about him where he's like talking like he's a prophet. He doesn't really prophesize that much, but he kind of has that vibe to him. So he just kind of stands out in the open and lures Robocop into another trap where they've got like a supercharged taser thing that they fire at him to sort of make him fry. So he's just kind of like,
Again, to some extent, I guess that could, like, in the universe he's established, sure, electronics affect Robocop and, like, short out his system. Fine.
Yeah, I can go with that.
I don't feel like that should work, but if you're going to say that's a rule, so be it. I'm willing to work with it.
Yeah, they also cut off his hand here. So someone bashes it off.
No, they shoot it with a sniper rifle because he's got a gun in it.
Right, quite right.
Also, sorry, just as they're walking in here, just to show Kane being rich or powerful or whatever, they show that they have Elvis's skeleton in this warehouse.
Well, so it's funny. I was trying to think of a way to describe the guy with the slick back hair and kind of the clasp, right? And I thought, he's got a bit of a sort of country vibe or something. And then they showed this little like shrine with Elvis's skeleton and like a photo of Elvis, and I was like, oh, he's an Elvis fan. Did Kane buy his friend Elvis's skeleton because he loves Elvis? Is that what this is?
Why are you keeping it in the random warehouse?
Does he come by here every day and like pray to the ghost of Elvis?
It would also be one thing if like it were tucked away in a corner where you're like, oh, this is just my little shrine, because it's not just the Elvis skeleton. Like they've got like big giant crystals and stuff like that. They've got a bunch of expensive looking stuff. It'd be one thing if it were tucked off in a corner and we say that's our expensive stuff corner, but like no, it's dead center in the middle of this room. And he just walks by it like, all right, that's weird. Moving on.
It's a very strange detail. I feel like there's more in the script about it, perhaps.
Yeah, that would make sense.
It just got lost by the wayside. Or maybe the set and prop designers were just having a field day and they were given a budget and said, we've not spent all of our money yet, so let's have an Elvis shrine.
I imagine the script direction said something along the lines of like, we walk by multiple things that show how rich Kane has become from his drug trade. And it didn't like explain anymore. And the set designers were just like, well, giant crystalline things. And we've got this Elvis costume and it's skeleton. Sure. Let's run with it.
Yeah. When the truck much later scene gets like stopped and captured and there's money in the back, they say something silly like $350 million is in the truck. And I'm like, okay, even for a drug empire, that is a lot of money that they've got in one truck.
All the Detroit money had to go somewhere.
So, yeah, basically they're able to grab Robocop. He does sort of get a little bit of revenge by like shocking the taser into his like, exposed hand, which shocks the wielder of the taser gun. But
that's how that works.
Yeah, but they're able to knock him down, and they just sort of like pin him down. They tie him down to like a table. And we just get like a montage where they go at him with like an axe and like a jackhammer and stuff and just dismantle parts of him and take his arms off and take his legs off. It's a whole thing. And they just drive up to the police station where all the police are on strike and just dump him out, all the parts of him. And there's a great shot actually of him like just like they've got like an animatronic like sort of upper torso and head moving around like he's in great distress.
Yeah, he's like having a seizure almost. Like he's not getting out any coherent words, but he's like squirming around constantly.
Yeah, which does lead to something that could be an interesting plot thread, which is this idea of like, is it worth fixing him? And there's an argument from this scientist lady who really cares about Robocop, who's a new character in this movie, who, there's not really much to go on here. But Lewis is also there. There's also another lady cop who has a few lines here and is in the scene towards the end. But
yeah, she had a name. I think it was like Estevez or something like that.
Yeah, she's a very minor character, but she's again here saying, no, this is Murphy. He's one of us. Fix him. He's in pain. But the evil guy from OCP is like, this will cost a lot of money. This is a lot of upkeep.
It costs like $38 million for parts alone. There's no way to justify that.
He's an OCP bit of property. He's not a person. Deal with it. And they take him away.
Which everything in this scene leads me to believe Robocop will not be repaired. And there is no scene which pivots that to say Robocop will be repaired.
It's kind
and
of...
yet suddenly, Robocop is repaired.
Well, it's kind of implied. There's a little bit of a nudge and a suggestion. So basically, what's her name? Fax, like scientist lady, right? Who's got her own evil goals. She's doing like a committee with people talking about, oh, what if we were making a new Robocop, what would we do? What's wrong with the first one? And it's like, and that's really like a satirical scene about like parents who complained about the first movie or something.
Absolutely.
Even though it was like a complete like NC-17 movie, of course kids weren't supposed to be watching it. But it's all these like old people going, oh, we think Robocop shouldn't use violence. He should be nice to people. He should help people across the street. Maybe help a cat out of a tree.
Why doesn't Robocop try to talk to people first?
And I felt like what they're going for here is that Fax wants Robocop to be less effective so that the next Robocop is needed, right? That seems to be kind of what they're going, because you know that's what this next bit is that she pumps it full of like 500 directives so that he is not a person anymore. He's just a list of commands, and it just makes him operate terribly.
Yes, obviously he only had the 3 directives before. All of them flowed very well into one another. This one, like you said, 500. I love that they showed specifically like certain directives, like they show them scrolling across the screen, and there are ones like smile more, or be nice to people, or like remind people that good hygiene is a good thing. But one of the main ones that I saw scroll up was dodge meetings with Orion, which obviously this movie was distributed by Orion. That's a beautiful little Easter egg.
That's great. Yeah, so I think, yeah, obviously the evil guy saying, oh, we're not going to pay the money to fix this is all fine, but I think Fax has an infinite budget right now because she's promising results to the old man, and this is part of her doing. So I think there's no explanation needed for why it changes to he's being fixed. It's just that, oh, because she wants him fixed for part of her plan, that's it now. It's just she authorizes it, he's fixed.
Yeah. So. Also, there's a bit where as they repair him, as they show his body like fully, she's typing stuff into a keyboard, and we're getting the application that like she's rewriting his like core stuff, and we get the sequence of him saying like, I am Officer Murphy, and she's like, no, you are not. You are Robocop. You are no longer that person. And she types some stuff in, and we see him become like, he says like, I am Robocop. That is all I am.
Takes a few tries. It's like the rule of threes. It's like he resists it twice, and then the third time he says, I am Robocop.
Which again, if this felt like it were tied into that earlier stuff of like, are you a man? Are you a machine? But it feels so completely separate. It feels 100, especially because he opens it up saying, I am Alex Murphy, where the earlier scene already established that like, no, he should be feeling like he's Robocop specific now. It just feels like we're retreading the same ground over again, but in a different setting.
Wait, what earlier scene implied he should already be saying he's Robocop?
With the bit with his wife. And
no,
like,
but
they were saying like,
but that was a lie,
you're
though.
not a... Oh yeah, of course it was. Like if you view it through that lens, so be it. But like it feels like it's following the same plot, and yet they don't reference it. It's so completely removed from it. It doesn't feel like it's part of that same thing.
Yeah, we're on to a new thing. The movie keeps moving on to new things, right? It's just the way it is, for better and for worse.
Yeah.
So we get this this sort of segment of the movie where Robocop goes back to the station and everyone's happy to see him. You know, the captain or sergeant, whoever it is, you know, it's the same guy from the first movie. He's like, oh, happy you're back, Murphy. And Robocop calls him by his first name, and that really distresses. He's like, well, that was weird. Right? Yeah. And then he does it to Lewis. He's like, you should try and have a nice day, Anne. It's a beautiful day. And she's like, what's wrong? What have they done to you, Murphy?
What did they do to you?
What did they do to you? And she's like, you know, really, because they're in the car driving, and you know, I think Lewis is definitely criminally underused in this movie, but this is the one part of the movie where she's very important because she's the one noticing that everything's wrong with him and can sort of recognize all that. And you know, he keeps saying things like, "Oh yeah," you know, I don't remember what the phrase is, but he brings up like a saying and just sort of starts saying things like, oh, early bird catches the worm, and just smiling and whatever.
Later on, he gets in a conversation with some kids, and like he specifically is getting stuff wrong. Like he's like, now remember, a rolling stone is worth 2 in the bush. It's like, what? What are you saying, man? You're crazy.
Well, yeah, that's the crime they're called to, is that an electronics store has been looted by a child's baseball team.
I got a kick out of this. I won't lie.
Yeah,
I thought this was funny.
I laughed when they cut to this, and I laughed even more when it was clear that their manager was the leader, and like he was actually directing the team to do this. This was all very funny. They're all in uniform. They're beating up and just torturing the guy that owns this place, and they're stealing stuff. And Robocop shows up, and Robocop does not pull out any weapons. The guy keeps shooting at him. Lewis is like sort of hiding behind him like he's a tank, but he refuses to get violent. So Lewis ultimately has to shoot this guy in the head because he's taking shots at them. Robocop comes up, she goes in to try and deal with the kids, and Robocop grabs this dead man and starts reading him Miranda rights, and Lewis eventually comes out and says, "What are you doing, Murphy? He's dead." And the way he looks at him and then looks back at her and goes, "I am having trouble." It's really funny to me. I got a proper laugh.
Yeah, and again, as we develop more and more of this plot, I like it more and more. I would be totally fine with it if this were the rest of the movie, and this was like, okay, he's been overloaded with directives, and he's going to just have trouble doing anything, and he's got to, like, maybe the plot that we follow is him just trying to, like, navigate it, trying to, like, figure out how he can still do his job despite all of these conflicting informations, and then eventually he comes out on top and manages to surprise everybody. But I mean, within 20 minutes, this is all wrapped up and done.
So the 20's been generous. That said, this little league team do notice that he's not working and say, he's effed up, and they all just bolt.
Yeah, and he's still giving affirmations. He's just like, now remember, kids, hygiene is most important.
So, yeah, they take him back to the station, right? And he's still not functioning correctly. The scientist lady, not the villain, the one that likes Robocop that's at the station.
Well, hold on. Before we go back to the station,
sorry.
The sequence where he does finally pull his gun. They're standing on a street corner. Robocop just closed up a fire hydrant that some kids were playing in. And the kids are like, dude, what the hell, Robocop? He's just like, haste makes waste. And then they just flip him the bird and run off. But then he moves Lewis behind him, says, watch out, pulls out his gun, starts firing on this guy. Turns out all he was doing was smoking. He's just standing on a street corner having a cigarette, and he fires like gunshots all around this guy's head, and then puts it away, says, thank you for not smoking, and tucks it away. And apparently this was used in movie theaters as like the please don't smoke in here, because that was still apparently somewhat commonplace back then. So I like that scene specifically because it shows how out of whack his morals are in this, where that's what he's willing to pull a gun on, is a dude smoking in public.
Yeah, so the scientist lady says, oh yeah, they've screwed him up with like 600 directives. Like, they're just frying his brain. He can't like keep them all straight. It's messing him up. And it's when they mention Kane, there's not much of a motivator for why he decides to try and fix this. Which, again, this could be an entire movie's plot of him trying to fix this new coding and try to, like, the human to come out through the other side and shed the shackles of all this stuff to put in him. But they mention Kane, and that's just enough to make him go, I need to fix this. So he just storms outside, goes up to the power box, and just rams his hands into it, and just fries himself for, like, 30 seconds. And all the cops on strike with Lewis just kind of, like, pry him away with some wood. And then they try to carry him. He's like, put me up. He gets up, and he's like, all right, I do have a problem. Kane, are we cops? Yep. Cut to all of these cops working with Robocop again, all going together to take on Kane and arrest him or kill him.
So as they're carrying him, you see his like vision coming back online, and we do see the little text at the bottom that says like listing directives, and it says no directives found. So I thought naively, when I thought this movie was actually trying to do a plot, that was going to be the thing of that. Not only does he not have the massive list of directives right now, he also doesn't have his core 3 that were from the first movie. And therefore, he is the most human that he's been since he became Robocop. He is able to essentially act with absolute free will. What does he do with that? No, but it's there.
Yes, absolutely. So I think my favorite thing about them going to get Kane is that it seems like Kane and his gang just haven't they never went to a new location despite, because I guess they felt invincible because they took out Robocop. Like, oh, no one's going to come after us. The cops are on strike, but they're still just at the same
literally
place.
The villains in the first movie. They killed Alex Murphy. They're like, yeah, we did it. We killed a cop. Don't have to worry about nothing.
Well, yeah, but like no one survived to know where they were, whereas Robocop would know where they were.
True. Yeah.
You know, they could get that from Robocop.
Yeah, they just assumed that he was shut down.
So, yeah, like they storm the place. We get this big sequence, lots of gunfire, lots of people getting shot. This is where the sniper gets shot in the eye and all that. But the villains sort of bolt to these two sort of armored trucks. I was going to say steel trucks, but all trucks are made of steel of some form. But
to some extent, yeah.
But it's got. But if you see a photo of them, you'll know what I mean by that, because they've got more metal. It looks a bit more angular. It's
yeah. They're armored trucks. Yeah. I think that's fair.
So the lady and the kid get into one truck, and they basically just get away, right? They fly off. Kane's in the other one, but Robocop's determined to get Kane. So Robocop like jumps onto the truck, like tries to stay on there. So we get like this whole chase sequence where Kane gets Robocop off the truck and he's quite thrilled about it. And that's when Robocop decides to block a motorbike that's going past with his hand, and he steals this guy's motorbike. So we get the visual of Robocop riding a bike, which is phenomenal. And
very nice.
Just Robocop chasing down Kane. And ultimately, I think my favorite part of this is when he just sort of drives into the front of the truck so that he launches into the window.
Yeah.
Delightful. All just very delightful. Fun action stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that this sequence is perfectly great. I think there's nothing wrong with it in terms of the flow or the structure to it. One other thing we glossed over is that they show that there's different variations of Nuke. It doesn't come back, but they show essentially that they are developing this stuff, and the core idea that Kane is trying to get across and why he is a cult leader is that this drug is being developed cheap, and it's being mass developed, and it's a thing where anybody is able to get their version of paradise. They're able to reach their own nirvana, and that's why he sees himself as like a religious figure rather than just some other drug lord.
Yeah, he's basically got different flavors, like he's selling energy drinks.
Yeah.
Like the main one's red, but here's the blueberry flavor and whatnot.
Yep. And he has a chemist there, and it seems like he actually knows a bit about the chemistry, because when it doesn't come out right, he specifically says what needs to be like added or changed to fix it.
Yeah, add 2 milligrams of this thing. Ugh.
Yeah. Turns out the chemist is a cameo from Frank Miller. That's what Frank Miller looked like at that time.
Ah, interesting. Very interesting. So, yeah, big sequence. Kane is obviously heavy injured when the truck like crash lands and whatnot. Yep.
Now, right here, this is an hour and 6 minutes into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
We now spend 20 full straight minutes of no Robocop whatsoever. And this is where I felt the pacing absolutely died for me.
Yeah, I don't really have that problem, because what it does is interesting to me. So basically, Fax decides that Kane's the perfect candidate for Robocop 2, right? Which obviously that's what was going to end up happening, right? Because movie. Yeah. And she kind of like lies about the fact that he volunteered. She even kills him intentionally. She kind of like, you know, turns off all the ventilators and stuff and is like, nope, you're going to be a beautiful robot. And she basically decides that because he's addicted to his own drug, this nuke, that she can sort of use that to keep control of them and use it to like sort of, okay, when he's a good boy, he gets some nuke because he'll still want that. I loved all the crazy like B-movie science fiction stuff that comes out of this. I love his brain and eyes in a jar.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I thought that looked great. Yeah. The idea that that's still inside the robot, fantastic. My favorite thing about the design of him, though, obviously he's just kind of a big hulking thing. He's very Ed 209 meets Terminator meets whatever, but I love the screen that pops out and the super 1990 crappy CG face that's moving around and can't speak, but just kind of like either looks happy or angry depending on what's going on. I love that. Into my veins.
Here's the thing. I got enjoyment out of it. I think that they used it very effectively. It doesn't look good. Like, it doesn't look like... Oh, like, there's one point where the bombshell lady sees the screen, sees the face on it, and she says, Kane. And I'm like, no. You cannot tell me that you recognize that blob as any actual singular person. There's no way. But I appreciate, like, there are moments where, especially the moments where he gets more enraged, the moments where he, like, you know, needs his fix of nuke or whatever, or he's pissed off for whatever other reason. I think that because it is so low quality, when it starts, like, glitching out and starts, like, really starting violently shaking stuff,
Yes.
it gives it that much more of an edge. It makes it feel that much more visceral to it.
It's just a nice little taste of, like, what people in 1990 thought, like, the future of virtual reality was like, or something like that. Like, it's very Lawnmower Man or whatever. So I love just a little taste of that. And it doesn't feel bad that it looks like shit in that sense, because it's like, no, this is what they had at the time. This is, well, it's kind of an alternate Detroit. It's not really a futuristic Detroit. I mean, I know we've got a cyborg running around, but it's not like the regular people don't all have, like, computers that are ahead of what they had at the time. It's still more or less the technology of the day, aside from the robotic stuff that OCP are bringing to the table.
This feels like 1 or 2 presidential terms in the future. This doesn't feel like, 70 years from now.
So I love the design of that, and I also love that basically the way the plot goes here is that the kid and Bombshell Lady, they are like, need to, like, what do we do now? And she wants to go and help break out Kane from, like, the prison hospital or whatever. And the kid's like, no, F Kane, I'm in charge now. You do what I say. I'm the one who's got the nuke. You need your fix, don't you, lady? So you're going to help me.
This kid is so smarmy, but I love him. I love his, like, there's so easily is the trap of, like, you give a kid this kind of dialogue and he just, he comes off as still a bit too young or a bit too likable. I don't know what it is about this kid, but, like, I hate him. I hate everything about him. And that makes him so perfect for this role.
So what they do here is that because we've had this ongoing thing where the mayor needs to raise these funds so the city doesn't foreclose to OCP, they're doing like a phone drive, right? And this is a very American thing because I've never seen this in the UK, but it's this classic thing where they've got, like, all the phone operators in the background, like, answering the calls, taking donations, right? And, like, the introduction to this bit is, like, this, like, violinist who can play whilst contorted into weird configurations.
He's a contortionist and a violinist at the same time. What about it?
A contortionist.
We'll keep workshopping it. I'll come up with something.
But the mayor, like, he's saying, oh, this is why we need your help, so that, you know, the city doesn't go privatized by some corporation. We need to keep it for the people, right? After that violinist, what does that take us to? And you see a sign that says goal 37 million, current amount 4,000 something. And I was like, oh, that's really funny.
I also love how, like, it cuts back to the mayor and he knows it, but his face doesn't break. He's like, all right, good job. Let's keep going.
He's doing the happy politician thing. But they get a call from the kid and the lady, and she's like, hey, we want to solve all the city's problems. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, what's this? So this leads to a scene where they're going to meet. The mayor comes to meet them, and they're like, yeah, look, this nuke, if this becomes more acceptable and legal, then all the crime that's happening in Detroit will go away, because that's what they're all doing. They're all just wanting money to buy this drug. If you turn a blind eye to this, you can, like, take care of all the other crime, and you could be the mayor that cleaned up Detroit. And, you know, you need 37 million. Why don't we give you 50 million? Just to make sure you've got some extra cash to keep the city going.
I'm sure they'll try to throw some extra fees on top of it for you. We'll go ahead and just throw on an extra $13 million.
So they're very scared. Like, the mayor's very scared at first because they're kind of threatening. They've got guys with guns. But when he hears this, he's like, oh, he's got a point. Don't you think he's got a point? Oh, he's got a point.
There's one of his guys comes up and it's just like, you can't seriously be considering this. Those guys are criminals. And the mayor's just like, I think we throw around labels a bit too easily here.
Oh yeah, he's such a sniveling little, he's ready to give in and just do this because it'll keep him in power. Which, everything where he's saying, oh, we have to keep the evil corporation from taking over the city. It's all about him keeping his own power. It's not about doing right by everyone.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be fair though, like, obviously, if we want somebody to win, it's going to be the person that, like, at least theoretically could be democratically voted out rather than the company. But yeah. Also, simultaneously to this, over at OCP, they're shocked by this. They're like, we didn't expect anybody to be able to come up with the money to back them, so they're a bit concerned about this.
They learn that this is happening and that there is a donor, and this actually leads Fax going to Kane, who's now Robocop 2, and says, hey, here's some nuke, but you've got to do something for me first. I love this scene that's about to happen, because it is a horror movie where Robocop 2 enters this secret place, this warehouse or whatever it is, they're having this meeting, and it's just there to kill everyone. And the way they do this, by having all the lights turn off, and then these like 4 spotlights that are on Robocop 2 turn on, and we get this great stop motion stuff of Robocop 2 walking around and just killing. And I think what I like about it is, like, initially it's very loud because, you know, there's a lot of henchmen with guns that he takes out quite quickly. But then it becomes this stalking predator walking around in the dark, and the kid, the mayor, and a couple of others are like sneaking around trying not to be seen. I actually love this scene. I think this scene's great.
No, I'd agree. I don't think there's much wrong with this. My only thing that I was thinking, though, that was a bit of a negative, because again, I was enjoying the scene, but it kept coming back to, by this point, it has been nearly 20 minutes since we've seen anything to do with RoboCop. And it's not that I need him in every scene. I think that it's fine to not have it. But for such a long stretch of time here, I guess I'm kind of just wondering, like, what's he up to? Why isn't he here? Why hasn't there been any sort of response on this sort of thing? It just...
To be fair, this character is the title character. This is RoboCop 2.
Got me there, Pete. A technicality, but ultimately successful.
If anything, you should be saying, why isn't RoboCop 2 in more of the movie?
Boy, I can't wait for RoboCop 3, where both of these guys fall by the wayside and we just go to the new robot.
I mean, I don't know. I guess because I'm just used to the way the movie is. I never once stopped and thought about, oh, where's RoboCop? Why have we not seen him in 15, 20 minutes?
I mean, I get it from the viewpoint of, like, if you look at it of, like, what crimes have been committed in this time, there's nothing, like, violent or anything like that that has resulted in RoboCop needing to show up until the scene. And then he does show up in response to the scene later on. I'm fine with that. I mean, but it's more so of just, it's a strange that we went 20 full minutes in a movie that is an hour 45 once you cut out credits.
I mean, to be fair, I think this all just comes back to the core thing we've said is one of the main problems of this movie. Even though it does kind of make for a weirdly, wildly entertaining roller coaster, is that the structure is bizarre, it's strange, it doesn't follow normal conventions, and this is just one of the knock-on effects of that, is that RoboCop's just gone for 20 minutes because we're doing everything to set up the villain now, because we have to get through all the villain stuff of him becoming RoboCop 2.
And I guess that's kind of because of the structure-wise. In any other movie, we would have a lot earlier on the setup of Kane, like a lot stronger setup. Obviously, he's been around, but it hasn't been as strongly set up.
And a more conventional structure, and this might be for the better, admittedly, but when RoboCop first goes to take Kane out, that would be when Kane gets captured, and you'd start that process and sprinkle it through from there, and you wouldn't go through RoboCop getting dismantled. You'd maybe still have him be reprogrammed via other reasons, like maybe OCP just come in and decide they want to do that because they can. But but for whatever reason, this is how they've done it. But I do think this scene on its own is very effective in, like, because there's not, like, obviously I love Terminator and stuff, but there's not actually that many good movies about, like, killer robots stalking people in, like, horror movie style scenes, and it's a pretty effective one. I quite like it.
I love the little subsequence in here where he comes across his girlfriend, the bombshell, and he stops. This is when he sticks out his screen for the first time to, like, show the little CGI face, and she's like, "Oh, Kane, it is you," and he outstretches like this horrific robotic claw to her, and she's like, "Okay, this could, like, it's gonna take some getting used to, but, like, I think we could resume this relationship. We can make that work." And then you just see his face, something like, maybe it's the drugs, maybe it's his directive, whatever it is. He breaks. All of a sudden, his face just freaks out. He grabs the girl by the head, snaps her neck, and just throws her around for a bit. I think it's horrifying.
I think I took that as, like, her pretending that things can be normal again, just, like, pointed out how things had changed, like, how different he was. Like, I'm not that Kane anymore. I think that's maybe why he reacted so violently.
All right.
By the way, we kept calling her Bombshell because we weren't sure what her name was. I think it was Angie. That's ringing a bell now that I'm looking at it.
All right, I'm good with that.
I think I remember the kid, I think, saying that name when he's like belittling her. Is what I'm thinking. Yeah, I think it's funny actually. There's not a single like henchman bad guy in this movie that seems to like have a problem taking orders from a kid. Like they all just accept that he's in charge. Other than Kane, he's like the next in line.
That's why I like him so much. Is that we don't like. Yes, the mayor gives a little bit of like, oh hey little guy, shouldn't you be in school or something like that? But nobody else like questions his authority, which gives all of this hidden backstory that is never explored of like, what did he do to earn this level of trust in the organization?
Because it's never implied that he's Kane's son.
No,
never.
He's just a kid. Yeah.
And I kind of like that they don't explain it. It just makes him more interesting.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you get her being killed. The mayor like finds a vent basically and is able to like go out the sewer exit. He goes like flying out into the water, and the kid gets like, you know, the Robocop 2 spots him and he gets distracted by something and kills someone else, but then turns back around. The kid's hiding in like the armored truck, but when Robocop arrives after everything's went down and this is all over, Robocop comes in and finds the kid in the truck. Robocop 2 just shot up the truck. The kid's lying there dying. And there's actually kind of an interesting little moment where Robocop holds his hand and the kid says, no, don't go and like phone an ambulance, just stay with me, because he knows he's dying. He doesn't want to be alone. And it's actually like, just interesting that this ruthless little bastard who has been pure evil the entire movie decides that he wants comfort as he's dying, and Robocop kind of like, it's an oddly human moment for a movie that I don't think is pretending to have that sort of level of depth in it to like make you feel different about this character in any way, shape, or form.
Oh yeah, they even did a little parallel thing where he's just like, oh yeah, it's like, you know what dying is like, don't you?
Yeah,
like you know what, you've been through this before, and he's just like, yeah, I have. It's not great.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, but yeah, so it's sort of like this also almost as like a bit of a motivator for, you know, because I think he hears a little bit of like, oh, that whatever it was big. It was some, you know, the kid kind of describes what he can, but he says it was
like,
Kane.
It's bigger than you, and it's Kane.
So that sets up why Robocop knows, like the Robocop 2 is Kane, and why he's going to just immediately go and intervene. So OCP, despite the fact that this movie reminded us at the start that their previous attempts at unveiling a new Robocop led to like just disaster after disaster, they have this big ceremony where now, because they're definitely going to inherit the city, they're going to foreclose, they have this big thing, they've got a big model of the new Delta City on display, they've got a big theater with an audience of press and whoever, and like, hey, we're here to introduce Robocop 2, and this thing rises up from the ground, and it's all fine. And then like Fax like has done no effort here to understand what's going to motivate Kane, or like that maybe whipping out a big vial of nuke in front of it might set him off and might make him want the nuke. Because as soon as the old man whips it out and says, oh, this is the stuff that's got our, you know, our streets are addicted to it, immediately big Robocop 2 Kane like turns and is like, grab, give me some of that.
I love the concept that she just like was going to give him that after he completed his mission and just totally spaced on it. And that's the whole reason all of this happened, where she's just like, oh, right, crap, I was supposed to give him the drugs.
It's actually really funny, because after everything that happens in the next few minutes, right, and there's like people just dying on the street from Robocop 2, one of my favorite lines in the movie is the old man saying, this could look negatively on OCP. Assemble the spin team. Yeah, like this. Robocop 2's killed like 50 people in the last 5 minutes. How are you going to spin this?
Well, you say that, but like they do.
I'm sure they do.
You hear what they do at the end of like what their excuse is going to be, and I'm like, you know what? I've heard this in reality.
Yeah.
Like I've seen this happen play out.
Yeah, it all becomes Johnson like finally gets his chance to like get rid of the woman. He's like, hey, what if this was all the you know, the perpetration was all by one person, one disgruntled female employee who was in over her head and did some things that were unauthorized, and the old man's like,
didn't follow orders, wasn't a team player.
Yeah. And the old man's like, ah, yes, Johnson, that's a great idea. And I love that she actually comes up and like is nice to the old man, and the old man just turns while she's standing there and says, Johnson, that business we just discussed, get on it. Like, yeah.
But then he still walks out with her and gets in a car. Like, it's not like he's gonna tell her like you're fired right now.
I think he's thinking I'll have one last night of fun sex, and then tomorrow she's gonna get a lot of bad news, and that'll be the end of that.
I like to think that he's just like, it's never been as fun firing since that time I got to say you're fired, and then he got blasted out a window by Robocop. True. It's just that was kind of the peak firing for me.
Yeah. Yes. Now he gets to blast out of a window. That was maybe a sex joke. I don't even know what to say anymore.
Little. Keep workshopping it. You're close. There's something there.
I don't know what I'm trying to say.
But yeah, we actually skipped over. I mean, not really, because it's just the entire fight scene that happens. But like,
because I
nothing really does.
Yeah, well, I love that Robocop just sort of walks in with it. It actually looks like the big sniper rifle from the end of the first movie. It's like he's kept it, and he just comes walking in with it and just starts setting up like, oh yeah, like he knows this is a problem. It does lead to another line that I love. Even though he's the villain, I do kind of love after the fighting starts in this theater room. Eventually, the old man just stands up and says, "Behave yourselves!" Like that's going to solve it. Oh dear.
It's not a bad fight scene. I want to make that clear.
Oh, it's a fun fight scene. Yeah.
It's full. It goes up from like the top of a building, out of a window, down into sewers. Like it goes the full gambit, and it makes it feel like a whole bunch is happening.
It feels like an epic final fight. This is like the most epic it could possibly be before we get CG. Honestly, this is like dangling off the edge of the roof and like, going down. There's a whole bit in the elevator where Robocop like shoots the elevator cable so that Robocop 2 falls down and he like goes zooming up.
Oh yeah, and then you get the Robocop 2 like scaling up the wall of the elevator, again, and that is absolute horror scene.
Yeah, it's a horror movie. Yeah, it's great. All that stuff super fun. Eventually getting out into the street. Robocop dips away for a bit because he realizes that they need to be tactical, so he goes to get some nukes so they can use the nuke to lure it at some point. And while that's happening, finally Lewis is involved again in the movie, and she's like with the other cops, and she actually grabs like an ATV and rams into Robocop 2 with that. So she gets a little bit of action, but it's still alive. It still pushes the thing away and comes out. Which, by the way, Fax is watching this and is almost like turned on, like, oh, my creation's indestructible. I love this. And I'm like, lady, are you not seeing how much damage this is causing? Like, they're never going to let this thing just be active. This is, like, if it takes a nuke in Detroit to kill this thing, they're going to do it.
I mean, I feel like the longer it survives, and if it manages to actually like get to a point where it beats old Robocop, because I think that's what she's hoping for. If it beats the old Robocop, she's like, there, I was successful. Yes, it killed God knows how many Detroit citizens, but I was successful.
So it's just this whole thing where eventually the Robocop goes out with the nuke and has Lewis be the bait and like go out with the nuke and throw it. And Robocop's plan, and again, I love this visual. You see Robocop climbed up on top of like a truck or something in the background, and he jumps from an upper height onto Robocop 2's back, which is a glorious visual with the stop motion and whatnot. But basically he wins by pulling out the brain and the spinal cord and then stomping on it.
Such a good...
It's beautiful.
Like, here's the thing, again, from like a computer standpoint, it doesn't make any goddamn sense as to why like the machine is still going when the entire brain has been ripped out and only stops after he stomps on it and crushes the brain. But at that point, I was just having fun with it, so I'll take it.
It's like an after image. There's a little bit of command still in there. Yeah. Or something. I don't know. I can't explain it either. It's a whole fun thing though. The movie like ends in such a weirdly like minor comedic line though. It's really weird where after the whole thing with we're going to have her be the scapegoat, and the old man literally steps over like someone who's getting medical attention on his way out the door, which is just an extra little pinch of evil.
Yeah, like all the press is talking to the mayor and they're just like, Mayor, what are we going to do about this? And he's given like this whole thing of like, OCP is evil, we can't allow them to take the city, da-da-da. And then the moment the old man is stepping outside the building, they're like, all right, bye, and they just go over to him.
Which reminds me, the mayor's react, because he comes storming into the presentation before Robocop 2 comes out, and when they have Robocop 2 come up, he shits himself. He's like, it's that thing. Ugh.
But he doesn't say anything, because to say anything would be to say like, yes, I was in a warehouse accepting a bribe from criminals.
Yes. It would look very, very bad. So he's just terrified. But yeah, the movie just ends with like, Lewis is like, oh, this sucks. Like, he's going to get away with this. He's not going to face any like repercussions for what OCP's done. And then Robocop is just sort of like fixing his head because he got like, I think at one point in the fight there was like a blowtorch style weapon on Robocop 2 that like scarred his helmet, and he's like just fixing things. He's got like a little like wrench or something out, and he's like whatever. And he's like, don't worry, Lewis, we'll get him in the end. After all, we're only human. Cut to credits, and I'm like, that does not have the impact that him saying his name's Murphy at the end of the first film did. It's like a minor little like, he said another saying. Like,
yeah.
Okay. I mean, everything you have said, right? All just about everything you've said is completely accurate and valid. All the critiques you have levied against it. It is
This is the most scene I've ever felt throughout this entire show. I want to make that clear.
It's a flawed, messy film where things are just dropped, but somehow like almost every scene on its own is engaging. Characters are memorable and entertaining. Like, there's just an energy here, and part of it may just be that there's a good director actually making most of the scenes work just in and of themselves, that somehow it's entertaining in spite of like things not like following through, and like it's such a bizarre movie that just kind of works in spite of itself, at least as a piece of entertainment. It does not have any of those special qualities of the first film. It does not have the subtext. But goddamn, I'm into it like almost the entire time. There's like a few scenes here or there where I'm not as into it, but by and large, like I'm never mad that I've watched Robocop 2. It's so weird. It's surface level stuff. Oh, Robocop 2 gets to fight a more sort of cyborg looking villain at the end. That's kind of fun. It's more surface level, but damn if I'm not entertained. So bizarrely, I'm kind of a defender. Bizarre. I
mean, I'm not going to oppose you defending it. I think for me, looking back, I see one of the things we did about a month ago now at this point is the Twilight Zone movie. And obviously that one was an actual honest-to-God anthology. And I kind of felt like there was a rhythm to it where I could have gotten away with pausing the movie, walking away, doing something for like half an hour,
Oh, for sure.
and then coming back. But obviously I didn't. I watched it as the movie's supposed to be presented. This one, I feel, almost follows that same sort of thing. Maybe not like half an hour to an hour, but because of just how episodic the first half feels, I feel like every time I was done with a little plot sequence, I could go off, do something, come back, and then when I came back, it would just feel like the next episode of this TV show rather than
I would
the
say
continuation of this movie.
Less anthology, because things obviously do follow on in a lot of ways. So I would say it's more like 3 episodes of a TV show than it is anything else, which is... And I don't know, maybe there was like a time where they like, I mean, there is a Robocop TV show. I've actually got some things to say about that a little bit later, actually. Little bonus segment coming up. But it does almost feel like maybe originally like Miller was planning this to be like a TV show in some form, and it got like 3 episodes got converted into a movie without too much changing or something. Like that, maybe that would explain kind of it's the weird feeling of how everything just kind of keeps, I don't know, like there's definitely that kind of chapter way of this feeling, and some things in some chapters just never come back up again, and maybe if there was going to be more following on from this, maybe they would have come back round and that would have been more acceptable in a TV show perhaps. But strange, very strange. Anyway, what is your scene of the movie?
Scene of the movie. Here's the thing, I gotta go by the one that just gave me the best pop in general, because I don't think with this movie there's enough of building up to anything that it felt like I was actually excited when something happened. But the one that just got the best reaction out of me probably has to be the very finale of the fight scene of the end. The entire fight scene is good. I think it's all very solidly done. The elevator, him climbing up the shaft, going off the edge of the building, all that fantastic stuff. But I think the visual of ripping out the spinal cord and brain, stomping it on the pavement, and then that horrific CGI face just like glitching out and yelling in pain and stuff, like that struck me as the end of a movie that like could have been everything I would have wanted. Like there's a separate alternate universe where this movie was exactly what I wanted, but it still would have built up to that exact same payoff of a moment. So I'll give it to that. Sure.
I love that. I love the final fight. I think I got to go with Robocop 2 killing everyone in the warehouse, though. I think that as a horror movie sequence is just so effective. and instantly makes me like Robocop 2 as a villain is as hodgepodge as the whole thing is in the end. Like, that scene's great. But it's a credit. I don't think there's a movie that's objectively not as good as this that has so many good options for scene of the movie, because it does actually have a lot of good scenes in it despite everything else. So, all right, MVP of the movie.
I'm not going to beat around the bush on this one. It's the kid. Like,
Okay.
I don't know what it is about this actor. Like, he was very much a child actor. I looked at his history afterwards. He did some stuff as he got more into adulthood, but like, he really worked here in this like age 10 to 13 range, and he made his rounds. And he was, in terms of child acting, it's amazing to me that this is one of the few times where a kid is like dropping F-bombs. He's acting all higher than thou and stuff. He's trying to act intimidating, but like, I felt it. I actually felt the stuff he was trying to portray, rather than it just feeling like a kid who was told to act that way. So, top marks for him. He did a fantastic job there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anyone I'd argue instead of the kid, because the kid does stick out. He's one of the first things I think you think about when you think about Robocop 2.
Yeah. Which also says something for Kane, like, as an actor. Like, he's fine. He does an okay job, but I don't think there's enough there to make his character really pop.
I think if we count him as Robocop 2, I think there's an argument maybe, but if you're just going to be Kane on his own, I think he's interesting as the cult leader. I think he's got an interesting sort of dynamic as to the way he does things.
That's fair.
He's also famously from Manhunter. He's also good as an older actor. He's in The House of the Devil, the Ty West movie, and he's very effective in that. So he's a good actor overall.
Yeah, I mean, you set the rules here. If you think that counting the robot counts as the same character, then by all means.
I don't know if I would. I think that's me liking like sort of the effects and some of the nonsense plot more than I'm liking a character per se. It's probably the kid. It is probably the kid. I mean, I think the old man's got a couple of good bits. I think to be honest, I think most of the characters who have a prominent enough role get at least one or two moments. I mean, whenever you mentioned, but one of the actors from Aliens is one of the cops that are on strike. Like, he's just always there at the picket fence area. We saw him recently in Daylight on Collector's Cut, so that actor's just popping up all over the place for us this year. Yeah. So that's something. I think I'll go with the kid, but again, I think there's like a weird spoiler for choice. I think the mayor's entertaining as well. Like, there's a few people I could pick.
I think what it really comes down to is all the characters are written very well, and they each are like interesting in their own rights. The kid just has the most time to shine.
Yeah.
I think he has the most scenes where he's able to really show him off as a character. Even the mayor, who shows up numerous times throughout this movie and is always bombastic when he does, just doesn't quite have as much time to really develop. We didn't
even talk that much about the scene where they're torturing Duffy and Kane makes the kid watch. It's an interesting little moment as well. We should mention, Peter Weller's back, and I didn't look it up or anything, but I do vaguely remember like it taking some effort to get him back, and I don't think he wanted to do sequels because he's not in the third one. And I suspect that I think he does a fine job in this, but it does kind of feel like, okay, he's here doing a sequel. He's not exactly giving 110% like he was in the first one.
Yeah, I think from what I read, it was twofold of like, A, he hated having to work in that costume from the first one, which is part of why they changed it up a little bit for the second, just to make it a bit more easy to set in. And then B, apparently he also criticized the script for a lot of the same reasons that we did, saying that like it just didn't have the same build up to it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So with that said, David, what are you rating Robocop 2?
So, again, we gave Robocop 1 a very strong rating. I think that we were both very happy with Robocop 1. Just looking to see what the original here was. So, like, I gave that one an 8.5, which is, especially because, I'm not hugely sold on just overtly gory things. That's not something that really just gets a lot of laughs or enjoyment out of me. But just, like, the think piece of it and the way that they treated it, as silly of a concept as it was, how seriously they treated some of the motives of the character and the way that they move forward with that. Just imagining the sequence of him walking around his old home in that first movie, I could not imagine that or any scene like that in this movie. This is just treated as much more of a, yeah, it's a blockbuster sequel. It's something we kicked out, we had some fun with it, and we're not going to worry too much about the interpersonal motives that they're all going to have. That being said, like you said, I was entertained. I did have fun with it. I just think that I can't rate it as highly or even as close to as highly because I was hoping for...
No one's expecting anyone to rate Robocop 2 as highly as Robocop 1.
Right. Now. But I'm saying, like, I don't think it's even really close for me. I think that going into this expecting a sequel to Robocop and instead getting kind of just an exploitative sort of thing of like, well, we have the IP and we just want to get something out that people are going to buy some toys from. So all in all, I think I got to give this one a 5.5. I think it's better than average. It's above that middle mark, but not by much for me.
Yeah, this is interesting because I have a lot of fun with it. There's maybe a little bit of nostalgia mixed in, but I do think it's relentlessly entertaining despite all of its faults. So this is one time where I think I'm going to let my enjoyment override a little bit of the absolutely valid critique that you can levy at it.
That's fine. Yeah.
So I'm going to be arguably a little generous and give it a 7.
Okay. Perfectly fine.
Which is still nowhere near close to what I gave Robocop 1, for the record. Like, I'm not delusional here. It's... I just think it's entertaining. It's just relentlessly entertaining in a way that is just like only a glorious mess can be. So that's where I'm landing on it. So
okay.
There you go. That is Robocop 2. Next week on the show, we will be talking about a vote winner, and that is The Last Starfighter, another 80s movie on our series of 80s votes over on Patreon.
All right.
In a minute, David's going to have his bonus segment where he talks about a movie he did for homework, where he's catching up with something, and I've also got a little minor bonus segment that I'll get to as well.
I have no idea what this is. I'd love to hear it.
So just before that, I'll tell you, if you did enjoy the show, you can support all this content, all the podcasts we do, including the Atomic Cinema Experiment, by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. You can also be a YouTube member. Any way you want to support is obviously greatly appreciated, and you get bonus content every month. Me and David do 2 bonus shows. We have the Criterion Cut, which everyone gets, where we do a movie from the Criterion Collection, and we have Extra Reels, where we do some of the worst movies of all time. Sometimes they're even sci-fi movies. A couple of them have been. Not all of them, of course.
Does Neil Breen count as sci-fi? Do we count him?
I mean, some of them do. Some of them are definitely science fiction, technically.
I'm just saying, does sci-fi want to accept that? Can they just refuse?
If sci-fi was a sentient being, sci-fi would not want to accept Neil Breen in its echelon. But yeah, so worth checking those things out. Obviously, there's bonus content for the other movie podcasts, such as Screams After Midnight that I do with Tim, and all sorts. So, and we're in September now. It's worth mentioning next month on Screams After Midnight, we have the Octoberthon where we pump out a lot of episodes throughout the month.
I see our little filming schedule here. Yeah, that is a lot of Octoberthon. Good luck.
Yeah. We have started recording for it already, I'm happy to say. But so yeah, that is that. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all the usual things.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get to David's usual little bonus segment, I just want to mention briefly that because I happened to notice it on, was it Plex or was it maybe Pluto, one of the free streaming service things, I noticed they had the Robocop TV show. Mm-hmm. So I didn't watch a full episode, right? I watched like 5 minutes, but I thought I'd report on my findings because I'd never seen the TV show before, right? So I watched 5 minutes. I saw kind of the intro. I saw the introduction of their Robocop. I saw a couple things that are worth mentioning. My observations is that one, it did an okay job, at least from the opening scene, of doing like the news segments from the movie, right? So it's keeping that vibe. That's fine. Very good. Mm-hmm. That's something you can do with a lower budget, so that's all okay.
Okay.
But then itself, it was a very similar kind of hostage situation to like in the first movie with the mayor, whoever it was, or the senator who'd like taken people captive, right? So there's like a hostage situation. We have a cop with bubble gum, so I assume that's meant to be Lewis, although I never heard her name. And then Robocop enters, right? And first of all, they did have the main theme from Robocop, but it was like this really cheap synth version. And I can enjoy a synth like cover of a thing, but this is like 1991 synth or whatever it is. It did not sound good. It sounded kind of pathetic, honestly.
Right.
And the other thing I noticed as well is that, well, the suit looks fine. Like, they have like a Robocop suit that looks kind of similar to the movie. Mm-hmm. The actor in the suit was really, really emphasizing the robotic movements. Like, he was walking about like someone doing like a robot like walk. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, Peter Weir does that a bit. There's definitely some performance going into the walk in the movies, but this was like a lot more accentuated. And the thing that really stuck out to me, though, and I remembered hearing this years ago once I noticed it, but I did not know it going into watching these few minutes. Robocop goes into this building to take on the various hostage takers. After a couple of moments in here, I remembered like a trivia thing that I'd heard about this show. Robocop was not allowed to shoot people on this show.
No.
Right? It had to be safe for cable TV or whatever network it was on. So Robocop, and it's very noticeable, and this is why it sprung to mind once I saw a few of these moments happen, is that Robocop will shoot a chandelier which will fall on someone. He will shoot the bottom of a cabinet which will then tip over onto someone. He basically shoots other things so it will incapacitate the person. And after it happening twice in a row, I immediately went, this feels weird. What's happening? And then it clicked in my brain, oh yeah, I remember hearing that he wasn't allowed to shoot at a person on this TV show. And then when they got to like the main bad guy, he was like mutated or something. It was like a villain from like a really cheesy Batman show, like some like villain who's like taking people hostage. And this is where I turned it off and I went, okay, you know what? I'm not saying I'm never going to watch this for content, but this is as far as I'm going now, and I'll bring it up on the next Robocop review. But
that's fair.
Yeah, I think the crappy theme, the over-the-top acting, and then like the fact that he can't even shoot anyone were the things that went, okay, this is why this failed. this is why this didn't work.
I'm a little bit concerned, just based off everything you said there. I have opened the Wikipedia page for the live-action TV show. Quotes, it lacks the graphic violence of the original film and its sequel, and this is the part that concerns me, and is more in line with the tone of Robocop 3. So I'm a bit scared to watch Robocop 3 now.
Yeah, it's closer to 3. That said, though, I still think there's a clear difference between Robocop 3 and the show, at least from memory.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll
see. I mean, there's lots of things I could tease for 3. I'm not going to, though. We'll get there. We're not going to get to 3 quite as quick as we did to 2 versus when we did the first one, but don't worry, it is on the schedule down the line. We will be doing 3, and unfortunately also the remake. So
see, now that has me even more scared. The fact that we just said 3 might be absolute crap, and you're like, and unfortunately the remake.
Well, I think 3 is at least more interesting to look at, because it's like, okay, what weird choices did they make? You know, here's these other elements they did with it.
Okay.
You know, at least as a bad movie, 3 has some nostalgia along with its badness.
See, but that's for you. I don't have any nostalgia.
Yeah, but the Robocop remake's like, okay, but now we're 2014 and we're doing an ultra slick modern interpretation of Robocop. Yeah. That bothers me way more than what they did with 3.
That's fair.
Which is not letting 3 off, but 3 at least has some interesting badness about it.
All right.
So, all right. Okay, what movie did you watch for homework, David?
Well, still going in the 80s vibe, so I decided to go to Escape from New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no particular reason, just one of those ones I wanted to get done, and it seemed to fit in pretty well here, tone-wise.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah, go for it.
Did you know that this movie, before you watched it, was going to involve someone landing a plane on top of the World Trade Center?
No, but during the sequence where he's flying in and they show like the little computers and stuff, and they specifically show like he's gonna have to pull up, so they show the plane like angled down into the World Trade Center. I was like, oh no. Yeah, is this why I don't hear about this movie anymore?
No, it's still a cult favorite. Obviously, the John Carpenter and the people making this movie did absolutely nothing wrong. There's no way they could have known that any of this would feel weird in the present day because of something bad that happened in the real world. But it's hard not to just watch that scene of him flying a plane towards that building and not just be a little like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it's a hard one, especially when they tease the fact of like, oh, he might not make it up the whole way. I'm like, no, he better make that up the whole way.
yeah, Escape from New York's one of those movies that I want to love. I want to love it, and I think it's a great premise. I think it's got great music, but the actual plot progression is just kind of dull, and everything that actually happens once he's in the city, I just don't think's that interesting. So, not to color what you're about to say about it, but I, unfortunately, have never loved this movie and really want to.
Yeah, no, for me, Escape from New York is a movie that I want to love. I really want to love it. Unfortunately, everything that happens once he gets to the city, I just kind of find dull. No, seriously, like, that's almost exactly how I was feeling about it. Yeah. I think that Snake Plissken is an A-tier character. I think that is a fantastically written character. This idea that like his reputation precedes him, everyone knows what a badass he is. He really plays it well. I think that is an A-tier character, and the movie is full of other interesting characters, probably none to the extent of Snake, but like it's a very well thought out world. It's a very interesting concept to it, but ultimately everything that they were doing throughout the entirety of the plot, I felt like there were more interesting choices that could have been made at every single juncture.
Yeah, the setup is so good. New York was disconnected from the rest of the country in an earthquake in 1997, I want to say it said. Something like that. And it's turned into just a prison like island, right?
Yep.
However, the president's plane has crashed into the island, and as a result, the president's there and he's saved. But if we send in any authorities, they'll just kill the president. So we have to send in someone who is about to go to prison. And luckily, we have a badass who is very good at what he does, but has been sent away for whatever reasons. Yeah. Like, that is an A+ premise. I should love this. It should be a 10 out of goddamn 10. And I come out of it every time going, it's like a 6.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is they're so, like, I think they were so worried about the fact of it coming across as like too much that they pulled back each time. They were like, okay, we could have this huge big thing, but ultimately we're going to go with a little bit of subterfuge and like sneaking around and stuff. It's like, no, give me John Wick in the form of Snake here. And he just comes in guns a-blazing, does the job he needs to do, and he goes nuts with it. That is what I wanted to see. But ultimately it ends up being like, it's almost on the level of like trying to do a little bit of political satire in the way of like, this is, you know, set in the near distant future at the time, and there's this stuff of like the prisoners all feel like they should be released and whatnot, and it's this whole thing going on, but ultimately it doesn't feel like it ever does anything big or bold enough to earn the amazing set piece that it started with.
Yeah, I think the characters on the island should have been more interesting. The society that's built up in this prison state should be a little bit more interesting. And yeah, it should probably have some more action. There should be more Snake Plissken just showing how much of a badass he is. Maybe less John Wick and more like Arnold in Commando or something. But yeah,
that would be fine too. I mean, I wanted some more of anything, because ultimately, like, there's so much in this movie where Snake is just taken hostage and prisoner, and like he's not doing anything, and it's like, all right, but that's not why I'm here.
It's very deflating, right? It gets me so revved up for a great movie, and it just deflates me so much as the plot actually plays out, which is a shame, because it's an A+ tier premise. And I love John Carpenter as well. Like, John Carpenter, like, he has some absolute all-timers in this time period, and then he has some ones that I think are just okay. They're just lukewarm. And Escape from New York's one of those, which is a shame. Yeah. But hey ho. That's the show, everyone. That is
I got to give it a quick little rating. I will just put it at a 6. I think it's a 6. It's if I had to choose between which one I liked more between Escape from New York and Robocop 2, I still would pick Escape from New York.
See, I actually think Robocop 2 is more entertaining. I'd pick Robocop 2.
That's fair. I couldn't.
If Escape from New York lived up to its potential, it wouldn't even be a competition.
Right. Absolutely.
But unfortunately, it does not. So, oh well. That is the show, everyone. That has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Hopefully you had fun. Like I said, next week we are looking at The Last Starfighter, and we'll see you for that.
Sorry, weird little interjection here just because you reminded me. Last Starfighter actually was on a vote with Escape from New York, and it ended up losing.
Oh,
You
interesting.
said that at the beginning of the episode that you reviewed with Tara, and I was like, huh, that's weird that managed to win the vote this time around.
There you go.
Yeah.
Everything comes full circle. Also, the Rocky franchise is ongoing over in Collector's Cut. And Screams After Midnight's catching up on some 2024 movies in time for the onslaught that is October-thon. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.